Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I am Hashim Mahalbarra. When the US invaded Iraq in 2003, many accused the Americans of wanting to get their hands on Iraqi oil. Last month, that chance came by means of open bidding. Iraq held an initial auction to allow foreign companies to help develop 8 oil and gas fields. But only one field was successfully auctioned, and no bids were accepted from American firms. Iraq gets almost 90% of its revenue from oil exports. So why is the Iraqi government not doing more to develop the country's oil reserves? And why are American companies not getting in on the act?
Black gold, high quality, plentiful and easy to get. Attributes which make Iraqi oil highly desirable. But who will secure the right to Iraq's oil wealth? At the very heart of the matter are two issues which remain unresolved. Firstly, how much autonomy will the central government in Baghdad give to the oil-producing regions such as Kirkuk in the north and Basra in the south? And secondly, what will the foreign energy companies get for being allowed to operate in Iraq? On June the 30th, the day American troops withdrew from Iraq's urban centres, the Ministry of Oil opened the bidding live on TV. International companies vied for contracts on 8 oil fields, some of the largest in the world. With high hopes of raising billions of dollars desperately needed to rebuild, Iraq's Ministry of Oil beamed at the cameras and invited CEOs of foreign companies to drop their bids in the box. The results were disappointing. 7 of the 8 oil and gas fields failed to attract bids favourable enough to meet Iraq's tough conditions. Only British Petroleum, in cooperation with China's CNPC company already, were willing to agree the terms, winning the bid to turn the Rumaila oil field into the world's second largest. The foreign companies have been put off by the prices demanded by the Iraqi government. The government is offering to pay $2 for every barrel pumped in Iraq, rather than the $4 a barrel rate sought by oil executives. Continuing security concerns are also a likely factor in the disappointing uptake. Most Iraqis want to see their oil production provide revenue for rebuilding the country. The outcome of the bidding will be a further frustration as they continue to endure long queues for petrol in this oil-rich nation.
To discuss the issues of Iraq's oil reserves, I'm delighted to welcome from London Munira Chalabi, a political and oil analyst, and from Baghdad, alHassani, Vice Chairman of Oil and Gas Committee in the Iraqi Parliament, and from Amman, Falih Al-Khayyat, an oil expert and former Director General of the Iraqi Oil Ministry. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Iraq. Let me start by asking Mr. Abdelhadi Al-Hassani in Baghdad, why has the auction failed so far to attract more international oil companies, given the fact that only one bid was accepted by a British and a Chinese company?
I believe the first round bidding is really a new trial for Iraq to be able to develop its own oil and gas oil fields. Why it is only the British Petroleum and Sinopec company of China had accepted on South and North Rumaila, I think Iraq had put some terms and have done some very thorough study and what is the best term which is be acceptable to Iraq had been tough maybe in one aspect, but however they've been really concerned about the maximizing the Iraqi profits during really these agreements and that this contract simply will be a standard for maybe for years to come for many other companies to follow.
Well, that's at least the official explanation of the Iraqi government. Mr. Munira Chalabi, do you think that the tough conditions set forward by the Iraqi government, the imposing a service fee compared to the very lucrative sharing of production profits, was the main reason why the international companies decided not to take part in the bids?
I think the main reason why the big international oil company did not came to this bid, the first bid round, is really this is not for them. If we are talking about technical service contract, then we should, the Ministry of Oil, the Federal Ministry of Oil should have invited the technical service contract companies, which there are many around the world. Instead, they've invited the international oil companies, which is not their field at all. And second, if they have been interested really in these fields, the reason is they are putting themselves in line for the better contracts which are coming later. So that's the only reason we see some of the big oils like BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, who came to bid. They were not that much interested in these bids.
Okay, and then went empty-handed.
Really.
All right, Mr. Farah Al-Khayyat, you heard Mr. Al-Hassani saying this is because the Iraqis are very careful about who manages the issue in the future, and Munir Chalabi saying that there were a problem of procedure. What do you think of this whole issue?
Well, I think Iraqi policy was a model for the first bidding round. Their remuneration fee, maximum set remuneration fee, was not logically put. For example, they put $2 for North and South Rumaila, which represent 50% of Iraqi current production, and they produce about 1 million barrels a day. They put it at $2. At the same time, they put for West Gorna, which produces only quarter of that, at 1.99. For Zubair, which is approximately quarter of that, only $2. So although I am very glad personally that no more fields were awarded, only one.
Why?
But I think that Iraq, by being more flexible, they could have made their policy more successful. But I am glad that they didn't, because I am basically against the award of operating fields to foreign companies.
Mr. Al-Hassani, definitely we understand that the government is very much concerned that the Iraqi government might think that the bidding is more of selling the Iraq bonanza to foreign companies. How can you best juggle the concerns of the Iraqi public and the huge expectations of the international oil companies?
Iraq is really concerned of developing its own field. In the absence of hydrocarbon law, we have to find a way forward to invite really these IOCs, and however, before even establishing our Iraqi IOC national company, Iraq is working during a very difficult and transition period, which we need to establish the private sector in one aspect and even regulate the INOC if we pass a law. Simply at the absence of hydrocarbon law and at the absence of INOCs, we have to get some sort of agreement and contracts. One of the type of contract, EPC or first round licensing, which is, as you maybe mentioned and asked in the during first question, is the companies which came and bid for this first round bidding licensing, anticipating that Iraq very eager to develop its own field. Yes, true, but however, not on the expense of not preserve its own right, because they thought maybe the module of KRG profits could be repeated itself in the federal Iraq. And that's where we believe they got it wrong. However, there is a factor of the reserve, for example, of the Rumaila is supposed to 17 billion barrels, which is a big reserve. They accept $2 and IPR really, which is quite good, about 2.8 million barrels a day.
Well, gentlemen, we don't want to be bogged down on a debate about technical issues, but Mr. Munir Chalabi, why would the international oil companies come and invest in Iraq with this existing legal limbo? Because up to this moment, we don't know exactly what kind of law govern the whole issue of auctioning Iraq's oil and gas.
There is the main reason which is behind this, which was the main reason for the war and the occupation of Iraq. I believe it's the huge oil reserve, the cheap oil which you can produce from Iraqi fields. We are talking about around 118 billion barrel of oil, which is already known. But actually, we know that this is very, very conservative figures, and the actual figures could easily be over 200 200 billion barrels more, as the Deputy Prime Minister has said about 6 months ago. And many oil experts, many oil companies believe that Iraq have an oil reserve of over 300 billion barrels, could be up to 360. So we are talking, that's what the main reason why the oil companies are interested in Iraq. This is a very cheap produce. But I wanted to add one thing is about the Federal Ministry of Oil in Baghdad. What are their priorities? I think we do have a problem. It seems from the start of the occupation till now, all we are hearing is when the foreign oil companies will come to help Iraq. Nobody is talking, and I haven't seen anything which talk about the development of the Iraqi oil and gas company, the national oil gas companies, these companies which have...
We'll definitely come and talk about this issue. Mr. Falih Al-Khayyat, we are seeing Mr. Shahristani, Minister of Oil, running the whole show when there is a stalled hydrocarbon law of 2007 which states that the National Oil Company of Iraq has to oversee the future of oil and gas energy in Iraq. Isn't this more of a legislative problem that the Iraqis on their own have to solve first of all?
Well, actually, the whole issue of the first bidding round is an illegal impasse. Because the oil and gas law is still dormant between the Oil and Gas Committee of the House of Representatives and the Council of Ministers, then there is no law to cover any new oil field development in cooperation with foreign companies except the Saddam-era laws. And the Saddam-era laws clearly states that there should be no contract for oil development between any Iraqi entity and a foreign entity. It is not legal unless it is covered by law. And law can only be enacted by legislative authority. And at the present time, the only legislative authority is the Council of Representatives. Yet the whole first bidding round was made, conducted, and awarded without any reference to the Council of Representatives. What will happen in the future if the Council of Representatives come and say that these awards are illegal? Are they going to be revised? That will cause a lot of differences between the Iraqi government and the companies that have won the awards. So this is one of the legal impasse that's facing the Iraqi government.
Let me put the obstacle in a different way to Mr. Abdel-Hadi Hassani, since he's the Vice Chairman of the Oil and Gas Committee in the Iraqi Parliament. Mr. Abdel-Hadi, the plan seems very simple in philosophy: to boost Iraq's output from 2 million barrels a day to 6 million barrels a day in 6 to 7 years. You need billions of dollars from the international community, particularly from the international oil companies. How can you hope to achieve this when the political future of Iraq itself is uncertain?
Everybody knows that Council of Ministers, which is represent Iraq government of national unity, have all agreed to develop the Iraq oil and gas field, and have agreed even on the first bidding round licensing, and they have already agreed on even on technical service contract, which is supposed to be done early on in the year 2008. However, we believe that the way forward is to have the hybrid contract with the first round bidding licensing, which has combination of hybrid of technical service contract for the producing and also a service contract on long-term basis. This had been a plan for really Minister of Oil and Council of Ministers to move forward to develop the most important sector in Iraq economy, which is oil and gas. However, on the other hand, we still invited many companies on key projects. We invited on bidding, direct bidding contract for 10, 20, 50 wells. We are trying to do what we could during a difficult time, during a transition time where Iraq is really need to develop its own oil field, to develop other sector, which is simply like the sectors of agriculture, sector of industry. So we need really to have an economical policy which will develop as fast as possible its economy, its own political arena, and however the agreement of all parties which is taking part in the political process agreed on that line of really producing and development.
Mr. Munir Chalabi, to encourage companies to come and invest in Iraq, you have to overcome the obstacles. Everybody knows that Iraq is crippled by a corrupt Ministry of Oil inefficiency, professionals who have left the country after the ousting of Saddam Hussein, decrepit oil infrastructure, totally paralyzed political system in Iraq, divisions between the parliament and the government, within the regions themselves. Investing in Iraq, does it seem still a very smart move, given all these things we have spoken about?
Well, let's not forget that when you drill for water in any part of Iraq, you end with oil and gas. I believe the International Oil Company very much aware of that fact. They know that here what they have is billions and billions of easy to produce oil and gas. So saying, is it something which is profitable for? Definitely, there is no question about it. I think this never been a problem for them. They are aware of it. I think it's always been a problem during the Ba'ath regime since the 87 and 97 when they actually dissolved Iraq National Oil Company, and then they started privatization of the Iraqi wealth through production sharing agreements, which the most important three of them which have been signed before. But now it seems to me that the problem here, again, it's not the International Oil Company as much as the Iraqi, the Ministry of Oil, and of course the other side is the KRG, the Kurdish.
Okay, which drives me now to the most important part of the debate, gentlemen, which is the very thorny issue of who owns Iraq's oil and gas fields and who owns the right to award contracts. Mr. Falih Al-Khayyat, who owns the right, the exclusive right to oil and gas in Iraq?
Well, according to the Constitution, item 112, that Iraqi oil belongs to all Iraqis in all the governorates and the regions. So, theoretically speaking, that Iraqi oil and gas is the property of the Iraqi people, and the Iraqi people are the sole owners of this precious commodities. But the way it is going now, the Kurdistan regional government does its own policy, it follows its own awards of contracts, and therefore they regard that Kurdish oil belongs to Kurdistan and to the Kurdish inhabitants of Kurdistan.
Right.
The Iraqi federal government is fighting this trend by the Kurdish government. But at the same time, we saw only a few days ago that the Kurdish government not only annexed the oil of the Khurmala field, which is the northern part of Kirkuk, but also used that oil to be refined and distributed inside Kurdistan. This is an act of not only independence, but of actual and abrupt annexation.
So
who owns the oil? It's definitely the Iraqi people. But is it the Iraqi people who are practicing?
That's in theory, but not in practice.
This is the question.
Okay, Mr. Abdelhadi Al-Hassani, you've heard what Mr. Falih was saying. The Kurds are saying that they absolutely have the right to strike deals with the international oil companies, the same way the government is doing, and that you don't have the right to keep running the show on your own, and that the Kurds have their own semi-autonomous region, they have their own constitution, and who knows, perhaps they will have their own independent entity in the future. Do you have any concerns that Iraq might splinter in the future because of oil and gas?
Definitely, we are hoping that the oil and gas is one of the main factors who could unify all Iraqis in all region and governance. However, the interpretation of the Iraqi constitution wrongly by the KRG government, had really jumped to a conclusion that 115 is prevailing on even 110 and 1111, which shows that it's exclusive. 110 shows the exclusive power of central government for the foreign sovereign trading policy and simply on foreign affairs. And they thought this is not a mention. And however, as my colleagues had mentioned, Mr. Khayat, is that 111 shows that all the oil and gas belong to the Iraqi people. So the jump to conclusion had made them to go and produce. However, they rectified this by really believing that they have to produce and however, to export and sell this through federal government establishments, which is i.e. the revenue go sharing to central government budget, and that's where it is really remedy the problem. Yes.
Mr. Munir Chalabi, my final question to you. What if the next January 2010 elections bring a new government to Iraq? What will happen to the 20-year contracts that Iraq is trying to strike with international oil companies?
Well, at the moment, as we all know, that's only one contract has been awarded to BP and Chinese National Oil Company on the north-south Rumaila. So we are talking about one field. As my colleague said, we are very lucky that the other 7 has failed. So at least the other 7 will be left to the northern oil company and southern oil company and Misan oil companies, which are the backbone of the Iraqi national oil and gas industry. And that's what I wanted to emphasize, that neither this government nor the government even before it, they have really put enough thinking and on development of the national industry of oil and gas. So looking at after the first bid rounds, as you are very much aware, the opposition to the first bid rounds comes directly from the people on the ground, from the management, from the technocrats, from the trade unions, from everybody, because they can see it will end destruction of the Iraqi oil and gas industry. And I believe at least by the election, we know that one field will be opposed, which is the north and south Rumaila, which has been awarded to BP, and will be opposed by the workers. The workers and the management already said that they are opposing this award, as this is very destructive, and they prefer that these fields should stay to be developed by the Iraqi national companies, especially in the draft of the oil law and gas law, the hydrocarbon law. These fields are all part of Annex 1, which should have been developed by Iraqi National Oil Company and not by international oil companies.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. alHassani in Baghdad, Mr. Farah Al-Khayat in Jordan, and Mr. Munir Chalabi in London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on this edition of Inside Iraq. To watch the show online, please go to our website, aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join us again next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.